And now it's the names to know. Connor did submit these to me ahead of time. I didn't make him submit them to Cody. He actually trusted in me to give me these. So we're going to go ahead and get to the names you need to know, because I know y'all have been waiting on us to talk about KJ Bolden, and that is right why he's right there at the top of the list. The highest rated signee in the 2024 class from the state of Georgia, a late flip. I didn't believe that he was going to Georgia until I saw him put that hat on, but I just can't even imagine what his career is going to be like in Athens.
Yeah, and you saw the impact that Malachi Starks came in and had as a freshman year one, and I think that's why, of the guys on this list, KJ is the only freshman that I picked. You could have obviously said Ellis Robinson here, but I think KJ, with the fact that you've seen Malachi do this, with the fact that there's obviously openings at both the safety position but the star position as well, I think maybe there's a better chance to playing time there. And so this spring is going to be really interesting for him. I don't think he's going to be running with the first team, but when he steps out there in that number 4 jersey on Saturday, I think that's going to draw a lot of eyes and attention, and he knows that. He's played in a lot of big games for Buford High School, and I think people are going to be really interested in seeing how he goes out there and performs.
And as we said earlier, veteran Malachi Starks had a lot of praise for KJ Bolden. Here is Malachi on KJ.
He's very athletic, very smart. Just like all the young guys that came in with him, they all have talents that they possess. But he's very he's like a sponge. He just wants to soak up all the knowledge and all the information. You see him in meetings, he's just writing stuff down. And I think on the thing that shocked me the most, I think all the freshmen have that. Like I watch them in meetings, they're all taking notes, they're all writing stuff down. So I think that class is going to be very good.
Is it fair to say you reminded me of yourself a little bit?
A little bit. I'd say that just a little bit. Yes, sir.
I think he's downplaying it a little bit right there. There's so many similarities and comparisons between the two, not just because of their position, but they were both consensus 5 stars coming into the program, both names that people were consistently talking about. And so I can't think of a better person that KJ could learn from than Malachi Starks.
Malachi Starks is the best safety in America, and I think KJ Bolden ultimately aspires to be that. I think Malachi is going to be a guy that leads this program, leaves this program after this year, walks into the NFL as a first-round draft pick. I think KJ hopes to do that as well. So the fact that KJ is able to sit and learn from Malachi for a year, even if KJ doesn't see the field as much as some people anticipate, I think could be very beneficial for him over the course of his Georgia career.
So the next name we have on our list is Jaylen Walker, who played in all 14 games last year, led the team in sacks, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think it was word for word that Connor said he was the president of the Jaylen Walker fan club.
I am. Jaylen Walker, is a top 5 player on this Georgia defense, and he's not number 5. I think this is a guy who is as talented as anyone there is on this defense, and I think the reason I'm highlighting him here is, 1, I just enjoy talking about him, but 2, I think this spring is a chance for him to show what he can do at that inside linebacker position. That is where his long-term home is. That is where he sees himself playing in the NFL, because at 6'2", 245, while he's able to impact the passer in terms of coming off the edge on 3rd down, he can't live there on 1st and 2nd down and hold up against the run. So this spring, with Small Munnin being out, has been a big chance for Jaylen to play that inside linebacker position, just get reps there. That on a week-to-week basis last season, he wasn't really afforded, because you have Jamon Dumas-Johnson, you had Small Munnin, and then you had C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson in there as well. I think with Jaylen, you're going to see him play a lot at that inside linebacker position. I'd be surprised at how much edge he plays in this game, because Georgia has a lot of other guys they can use there. But how Jaylen Walker plays at inside linebacker is just so fascinating to me, because as touched on, as we saw in the Alabama game last year, he played 11 snaps in that game, and he had 2 sacks on those 11 snaps. And so his ability to impact the game on an every down basis is so tied to his ability to play inside linebacker, and I think this spring game in particular is going to be a big chance for him to showcase that.
DawgNation, if there's anything that you should take away from what Connor just said, it's that you need to find someone that talks about you the way Connor Riley talks about Jaylen Walker.
I like my guys. I've been a big Jaylen Walker fan, and I think he's going to have a really, really strong season. And I think if he can show that on Saturday, I think that's going to encourage a lot of people.
All right, moving on to our player that you need to know, the transfer wide receiver, Colby Young from Miami. So this is what he did at Miami. 47 receptions for 563 yards. 5 touchdowns, considering that Miami was not an offensive powerhouse, barely scored any points. I feel like these are big numbers, and I think that he's just going to mesh so much better with the Georgia offense and having a guy like Carson Beck, and I think we're going to see that on Saturday.
If you're lucky enough to be able to attend G-Day, and they're going to be doing some construction at Sanford Stadium, so it's obviously not going to be the full 92,000 capacity crowd there, You're going to see Colby Young, and as long as you're relatively close to the field, like that guy just stands out because of his size. He is easily the biggest wide receiver on Georgia's team. And the fact that he's been able to come in, even while dealing with an ankle injury, really impress teammates and coaches with how he's played, I think is really encouraging. Clearly, Georgia saw that it needed to strengthen its wide receiver position and went out and added 3 wide receivers via the transfer portal. Young has had the best spring out of those guys, and while there are other wide receivers in my mind worth highlighting here in this space, Arian Smith has had a big game. Dominic Lovett could be someone I certainly take in their upcoming draft. I think with Colby Young, it's how quickly does he connect with Carson Beck in this game, because he's absolutely got the size to be a red zone weapon. And I think a big spring game from him only further validates what we've heard he do for Georgia this spring in the practice settings that they've had thus far.
And moving on to our next name you need to know for G-Day, it's going to be Monroe Freeling. Played in 8 games last year, was a consensus 5-star. And he's had so much time to develop under what I believe is one of the best UGA offensive lines of all time. And I think that this year they're going to be even better. So I'm excited to see the development that he's made and the progress that he's made between last year and this season.
Yeah, the reason I go Monroe here is I think a lot of people, coming out of the end of last season, I think they just sort of expect Monroe to step in and be that next starting right tackle for Georgia. That's not going to be the case. I do not expect him to be the starter on G-Day at that right tackle spot. I think that's going to be Xavier Truss with the first team offense. But like you've seen Georgia do in the past, whether it be Broderick Jones, whether it be Amarius Mims, they've shown that they're comfortable rotating in tackles to play various spots. And they're going to do that with Monroe Freeling. Monroe Freeling has as high a ceiling, in my opinion, as anyone on this offensive line. So I'm interested in seeing what that rotation looks like. How much does he play right tackle? How much does he play left tackle? And with that in mind, again, Monroe, one of the bigger names. You mentioned 5-star recruit, big recruiting win for Georgia and Stacey Searles in that 2023 recruiting cycle. How does he continue to develop there? Because I know at a lot of programs with a player like Freeling and his capabilities, you'd expect him to just go ahead and lock him in as a starter. He's going to have to wait to see the field. That was the case with Broderick Jones. That was the case with Amarius Mims. And while some have said that might hurt their draft stock, those guys both ended up being first-round picks. I think Freeling has the potential to do the same. He's just going to be playing in a talented ensemble with guys like Ernest Green and Xavier Truss at the tackle position as well.
In Mike Griffith's show On the Beat, he actually said that he thought that not only was the offensive line UGA's strongest position group, but they had a chance to win the Joe Moore Award this year. And I don't think that happens without the rotation system that they get on and the development that they have to go through before they can claim that starting spot.
Right, and you look at injuries have played a factor in this offensive line in recent years. Jamari Sawyer briefly goes down during the 2021 season. Broderick Jones steps in and fills in well at that position, and then they ultimately make the big switch in the national championship game because they had already seen what Broderick was able to do. Last year, Amarius Mims, I believe, misses 6 games. Okay, they plug Dylan Fairchild in at left guard. They rotate Micah Morris in there as well, and they move Xavier Truss to that right tackle spot. Even in that game against Alabama, they had to make some changes there on the offensive line. So to have that level of depth, I think, is critical, and that development from Monroe is going to be so key for him. He's going to see the field this year. He's not going to play every snap like some people, I think, would hope or anticipate, but he's a guy that is going to have a very, very big say in whether or not Georgia ultimately does have the best offensive line in college football this year.
And the last name on our list for names you need to know is going to be running back Roderick Robinson. I mean, we wanted to see him so bad on the field last year, has fought through so much injury, but I do think that him and Trevor Etienne combined can bring the standard of what the UGA running back room used to be, and I hope that's the case on GA.
Yeah, I think it's easy to hear to have gone with Trevor Etienne, but I think we kind of know what Trevor is. Mm-hmm. You've seen him play at Florida. You know he has that explosive ability. The reason I went with Roderick here is I'm interested in seeing how he develops in his second year with the program. He had some nice moments last year, but as you mentioned, missed a lot of games with an ankle injury. So how does he continue to show his development? Running backs, it's tough for them in these games because, there's just not a lot of up-the-middle running, and running doesn't play a big factor in this. So how is he involved as a pass catcher? Has he improved in that regard? How do they use him potentially in goal line or red zone situations? Because I think with his physicality, he's 240 pounds. He's going to play a very specific role for Georgia. And you can mention Andrew Paul here as well, Chauncey Bowens. They're going to bring in some more running backs this offseason. But I think Roderick Robinson, by all accounts, has had a strong spring thus far. And I think if he's able to punctuate that with another good performance on Saturday, I think that gives you a very good feeling in terms of what you have from a depth standpoint, where you have Trevor Etienne, who can be your home run hitter. And then you have Roderick Robinson, who maybe in that sort of Elijah Holyfield role can earn some hard-earned yards for you.
So I know we don't like to address things like this on the show, but I have to ask, is injury something to be concerned about with him going forward?
No, it was an ankle injury that I think just sort of lingered longer, and then you add in that you have Kendall Milton, you have Daijun Edwards. I think they were choosing to be more cautious with that because when that injury had sort of happened, Kendall and Daijun had been able to come back and be healthy at that point. You also have Dylan Bell, who was able to play some wide receiver there. I don't think it's a situation like, unfortunately, it became with Kendall Milton where you're monitoring injuries every year. And so I think it was just a one-time thing that maybe the ankle injury lingered a little bit longer. And the fact that he was a freshman was the reason that he didn't see the field rather than it is something that you have to constantly be worried about.
So to wrap up, looking at this list, I'm going to give you the opportunity to have an honorable mention. Is there anybody that you missed?
I'd love to shout out a defensive lineman here. And again, I don't know what exactly we're going to see from this group on Saturday because, again, you can't hit the quarterbacks there and they're not going to run the ball a ton. I don't know how much Christian Miller is going to play because he has been dealing with a meniscus injury that kept him out of the Florida State bowl win. But this is a guy that I think Georgia needs to absolutely be a star for this season. You saw him make some big plays at the end of the year, make some impressive steps in that game against Alabama. I think Jordan Hall is maybe a 5-star guy that a lot of people are expecting to blow up. But I think Christian Miller is a guy who it's his third year in the program. He's got the size, speed, weight that you look for in impact defensive lineman. Well, he wasn't a 5-star. He was still a top 100 overall recruit. And so I think this is a big spring and offseason for Christian as he goes in and tries to establish himself as potentially that defensive lineman that fills that sort of Devontae Wyatt type role that Wyatt developed into becoming a first-round pick.
So Connor provided his names to know, but we're going to have everybody on the DawgNation staff submit their names to know, and that's going to take place at our DawgNation Game Day show, which is going to be at the UGA bookstore. And then, of course, Brandon Adams is going to have his infamous post-game show at the bookstore immediately following G-Day. Come join us. Come hang out with us. And we want to know who your names to know are.